welcome. I am Gimba Umar. Tonight, Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka calls for swift action by President Muhammadu Buhari in resolving the militancy in the Niger Delta. For the second time this week, parents of missing Chibok girls and other groups marched to the presidential villa, demand swap of Boko Haram prisoners from abducted students. Internally displaced persons take to the streets of Maiduguri in protest over diversion of items meant for them. State government orders direct distribution of supplies to the IDPs. And search for survivors in the Italy earthquake continues as death toll rises beyond 240.
And on business news tonight, federal government set to inaugurate multi-million-dollar agri-produce city in Edo State.
And in sports news, Real Madrid and Portuguese superstar Cristiano Ronaldo wins UEFA Best Player Award for 2015-2016 season.
I'm Ibrahim Adwa, and from Abuja, former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Professor Charles Soludo, challenges APC governors on achieving inclusive growth in states.
We begin tonight with a definitive appeal made by the president to be more proactive in dealing with the problems of the Niger Delta region. Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka made the appeal today at the press briefing in Lagos. He also asked the federal government to move swiftly and resolve prevailing socio-economic challenges across the country.
Over 2 million barrels of crude is what Nigeria's government projected to produce per day. That is if all goes well. But considering the huge attacks on oil installations in the restive Niger Delta region, about half of that is what is being produced now. On the average, it is said that Nigeria loses about ₦1 billion per day due to loss of about 140,000 barrels of crude oil daily to vandalism of installations. Militancy in the oil-rich region has reached an alarming rate. Nigeria's Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka is concerned, and at some point he has had to intervene to mediate for peace. At a press conference in Lagos to advocate for education development in Nigeria and an exchange program with the Lebanese government, journalists sought to know what the professor discussed with President Muhammadu Buhari when he visited him at the villa and how to end the attacks in the Niger Delta region.
I make that appeal once more to the government. Please respond to the efforts of these militant groups to arrive at a holistic and comprehensive solution. At the moment, they feel that the government of General Buhari, President Buhari, I should say, is not seriously responding to their own outreach.
Peace in the country is on the mind of the Nobel laureate. For him, the Boko Haram terrorists must not be handled with kid glove. I believe tough treatment must be meted out on terrorist groups across the globe.
Boko Haram, for instance, which you talk about, is the result of religious lunacy and intoxication. I believe are subhuman and should be treated as such.
Nigeria is faced with multidimensional challenge from security to economy. Education is another sector which needs an emergency approach. Again, for Professor Wole Soyinka, some unbelievable things happen in Nigeria.
How can a subject like history be excised from the curriculum of any school?
Time again, these words of caution, some of which sound like that of wisdom, rings loud and clear. It is about 2 years into the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. Activating these sort of advice may be a wise way to go. Sheung Okimbaloye reporting for Channels Television News.
While the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka is asking for a resolution to the crisis in the Niger Delta region, Traditional rulers from the area have also asked for a constitution of a dialogue committee to address the attacks by the Niger Delta militants. The monarchs, who spoke at a meeting with the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources in Abuja, also called for the release of some school children arrested by soldiers in May.
Attacks on the nation's oil facilities by militants in the Niger Delta, which has led to over 60% drop in the nation's oil revenues. Just last week, the militants announced a ceasefire, which came as a relief to many Nigerians. But few hours after, another attack was recorded in Niger with a loss of 150 million barrels of gas early this week. This meeting between traditional rulers from the region and the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources is one that hopes to find solutions to some of these challenges.
For the purposes of building confidence in the system, we wish to state here that as a matter of urgency, the federal government should do the following: appoint, constitute a federal government dialogue team. 2. Release of the 10 innocent school children arrested by the Nigerian Army on the 28th May 2016 in Okorosa, and others in detention on trumped-up charges.
The Minister of State for Petroleum Resources is grateful for the visit, but wants the traditional rulers to help prevent destruction of oil facilities by the Niger Delta Avengers. He is worried that the over $40 billion investment in the region over the past 10 years is yet to yield the desired result.
Our oil companies and everybody else must begin to play their role in the community so that we can move forward. Government obviously will engage and try and play its own role. But there is in fact an urgency of yesterday, not of now, in terms of the issues that we face today. So I do urge you, along the work that you've done, to continue to reach out to whichever splinter groups have not yet come away to announce and complement into the ceasefire, that they must immediately engage.
As the quantum of losses the nation has incurred owing to the activities of Niger Delta militants remains huge, the minister and his guests agree that what is needed for now is building lasting peace in the region and the nation at large.
Parents of the missing Chibok girls are asking the federal government to swap their daughters with Boko Haram suspects in the custody of the security agencies. This comes as some of the parents today joined the members of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign group for yet another march at the end of the 72-hour ultimatum they gave the government on Monday. The campaigners were once more stopped from gaining access to the presidential villa by the police.
Insurgents have come out asking him, let him release their people so that they will give us our daughters. So my call for the president, please let him come at our aid so that he will release the people of the Boko Haram on exchange of our daughters.
And they say they lose our girls until their fighters are released. Okay, they have been working on it. Up to today, they are still working on it without results.
Pictures of hundreds of internally displaced persons taken to the streets of Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, to protest against alleged neglect by the authorities. The protesters barricaded the Maiduguri-Gamboru-Ngala road, thereby hindering movement of vehicles for over an hour. The IDPs, mostly children and women, are demanding for the removal of the camp chairman, Mr. Muhammad Sema, for allegedly diverting supplies at the camp. In the meantime, the Borno state government has suspended the feeding committee responsible for feeding the IDPs. The deputy governor, Mr. Usman Darkwa, has directed an investigation into the accusations and ordered 2 trucks to deliver food directly to those in need. Mr. Dirkwa says that each family will now get its food stuff and cook them themselves. In the meantime, the United Nations Children's Fund has again warned of the worsening conditions of children around the Lake Chad Trough who face acute malnutrition. The United Nations agency explains that of the 475,000 deemed at risk, 49,000 in Borno State will die this year if they do not receive treatment.
The United Nations Children's Fund says that nearly 500,000 children around Lake Chad are likely to suffer severe acute malnutrition due to drought and a 7-year insurgency by Islamist militant group Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria. Of that number, 49,000 people in Nigeria's Borno State, Boko Haram's heartland, will die this year if they do not receive treatment, according to the United Nations Child Agency, which is appealing for $308 million to cope with the crisis. However, to date, UNICEF said it had only received $41 million, 13% of what it needs to help those affected in the 4 countries, Chad, Nigeria, Niger, and Cameroon, that border Lake Chad. At the start of 2015, Boko Haram occupied an area the size of Belgium, but has been pushed back over the last 18 months by military assaults by the 4 countries. Most of its remaining forces are now hiding in the wilds of the vast Sambisa forest, southeast of the Borno provincial capital, Maiduguri. UNICEF said that as Nigerian forces captured and secured territory, aid officials were starting to piece together the scale of the humanitarian disaster left behind in the group's wake.
The unfolding situation in northeast Nigeria, where the advancing military campaign by government forces together with the multinational joint task force against Boko Haram has in recent weeks been exposing a catastrophic situation with incredible suffering among the population.
In Borno, nearly 2/3 of hospitals and clinics had been partially or completely destroyed, and 3/4 of water and sanitation facilities needed to be rehabilitated. Despite the military gains, 2.2 million people remain trapped in areas under the control of Boko Haram, which is trying to establish a medieval caliphate in the southern reaches of the Sahara.
Many of the displaced are women, children, the elderly. There are urgent needs pretty much wherever we're looking. We've seen adults so exhausted they're unable to move, children with swollen faces, hollow eyes, other clear indications of acute malnutrition.
Militants are thought to have killed as many as 15,000 people since the launch of their armed campaign in 2009. Responding to its battlefield setbacks, Boko Haram has turned to suicide bombings, many involving children. UNICEF said it had recorded 38 cases of child suicide bombings so far this year, against 44 in the whole of 2015 and just 4 the year before that.
4 of 7 survivors who were on a working visit to the Igbe Ekiti Dam in Buin, local government area of Ekiti State, have drowned in the river. It was gathered that the 7 survivors from Kaduna State, northwest of Nigeria, were on their way from the dam after their research work when their boat sank in the river. The director of the Ekiti State Fire Service, Mr. Samuel Amoni, whose team was one of those that responded to the incident, explains that the bodies have been deposited in a mortuary. Part 2 after the break. More on the plight of the IDPs in Borno State. We have the Northeast Coordinator of NEMA in our Abuja studios to speak on the issue. Stay with us.